globalist. He grew up in 6, 7 different countries. He's Argentine Turk.
Steve Soltis, the guest of the 3rd episode of the Headhunted podcast. Excited to have you here, Steve.
Very excited to be here and only wish I was in beautiful Prague with you all.
Hey, I'm in Prague and you are in Atlanta.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Great. I have to have you here on board. We're going to be walking and talking about a couple of topics that I don't think I know anybody better than you. Let's first start with 2 quotes that are connected to these topics, and that's personal branding. And I liked what Jeff Bezos said about personal branding. And he said, personal branding is something that in the room being talked about you when you're not there. And Warren Buffett said it takes 20 years to build your personal reputation or to build up your personal reputation, and it takes 5 minutes to destroy it. If you think about it, you're going to be talking in a different manner. For all of you who do not know Steve, Steve was with Coca-Cola for 11 years, where he was responsible for basically everything that the C-suite execs were talking about. Internally as well as externally, Steve, that was a hell of a job. And before you were at UPS, where you were basically having the same job, being responsible for communications, external as well as internal, execs and the whole company. Coca-Cola worldwide, 11 years. Wow, you decided to leave Coca-Cola 2 years ago, open your own company. And then also you started as an visiting executive at the University of Virginia, Darden Business School, which is very close to me because I came out of there with my MBA. Steve, great to have you here. I'm very excited to talk about you and talk about,
great topic. And thanks for raising this issue. I think it's extremely important today.
That's what I want to talk about as well. What I want to touch base with you on is the difference between the U.S. and the post-communist countries as well. We'll get back to it. And also, I want to talk about personal branding and the importance of that. Obviously, after the fall of Enron and all of these companies in crisis 2008, and then other things, and the rise of social media, the importance of personal branding started to be much more prevailing than it was before. First, what I would like to talk about is 2 transfers, because this is the Headhunted podcast, and we usually talk about the business transfers or business moves as well. 2 that caught my attention. One is Jane Fraser, who has recently joined Citibank as the first female working for or being a CEO for a major bank. And the second is Gina Getter, who has joined as a CFO of Harley Davidson. My question to you, and then we have one person in UPS, right, that we've talked about offline. My question to you, when I was at Wall Street in 2003, 2004, working for Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, we would not see a female CEO in the role of a major bank. How is it? How has the Wall Street and how the whole industry changed?
Well, I think there's a great focus today, and has been a focus for the last couple of years, and it's really come to fruition over the last year, and especially over the last 6 months with social justice issues and others, to really make sure that we're getting the best talent, regardless of background, regardless of gender, regardless of political ideology, religious ideology, et cetera. The whole notion of diversity and inclusion is front and center on every radar screen, dashboard, I should say, in the corporate world today, and it's real. And I think what you see with both of these ladies that you mentioned, all 3, when you count Carol Tomé as well at UPS, who was, by the way, the chief financial officer for years and years at the Home Depot and served on the board of UPS. But these are 3 ladies with incredible depth of knowledge of business and operations and focus. They know their businesses and their industries inside out, up and down, inside out. Amazing content experts, amazing subject matter experts, and very, very astute leaders. And I think, the race for, I say the race, but the competition for talent is such that it's really forcing a lot of people to open up their minds and open up their hearts and souls, if you will, and really look at the best candidate, regardless of where they come from. So I think a lot of the biases, if you will, and prejudices and chauvinism from the past is no longer has a place in corporate culture anymore. That's not to say it still doesn't exist. It does, and it will continue to linger. But I think we're all encouraged by the tremendous amount of progress that we've seen. And these three moves in particular really excite me. As an investor in two of those companies, I'm very, very excited.
By the way, I have just my classmate, Kelly. Hi, Kelly, if you're listening, joining Schneider Electric as the CEO of Ireland, which is also in the industry where you would not expect something like that happening 15 years ago. So it's definitely changing. Now, Jane kind of makes sense in terms of staying in Citi. She's been with Citi for 15, 17 years. She was the first CEO or the first foreigner CEO for South America and so on. But then you have Gina. Gina came from food industry. She's done an excellent job before, but now she's joining Harley Davidson. Harley has always been followed by, let's say, an older, more, I don't want to use that word, but sophisticated biker society or so, people, guys. Now, Harley is losing market share heavily, so they've called a specialist from food industry to look at their financials and help the business. What reasoning is behind that? Because it's really like, it reminds me about, you don't really need to know too much about the industry as long as you know the fundamentals and have some smarts.
Well, and I think in a lot of these cases, what they're looking at are executives that have led strategic renewal and transformation within their companies and within their industries. You look at the food industry, Mikhail, especially in the United States. It's happening in Europe and other places as well. But processed food industry, packaged goods industry, et cetera, have undergone so much dramatic change. Consumer expectations around food, the way food is processed, the way the kinds of, our diets are shifting, everything's shifting. So having somebody from an industry that has been undergoing so much change, radical change, I think is really, really appetizing, no pun intended, for other industries too, that know that they need to make some changes. They know that their consumer base's expectations are changing, their business models need to change, market conditions or economic and market conditions are changing, and they need people regardless of, to your point, regardless of what industry they've been in.
And that's the case of Harley.
As long as they've been through and have led a strategic transformation. That is the critical thing, because those people that can impact change and drive change and strategic renewal are really in the catbird seat, because the entire world is changing and shifting on its axis, and has been for the last few years, and it's only been expedited in the last few months. So I think they're all smart moves.
I think we're starting to look at the consultants type of CEOs and CFOs, those that can break down what's going on. They can easily identify the clauses, and they can easily identify
that 360 degree view of business, right?
Well, great to cover these with you. Let's talk about something that's very dear to you, and that's Coca-Cola. 11 years discussing, not discussing, but directing what these C-suites execs are going to be talking about, what the message will be to the whole world. And then how do you transfer this messaging internally as well? How do you talk to the Wall Street? How do you talk to your customers, to all of the stakeholders? Can you walk us through that? And then when James Quincey onboarded, I would be interested also how that looked in terms of his different focus and his different communication strategy.
Sure, Mikhail, thanks for that. I came into Coke back in 2006. I left UPS. I was recruited to head over to Coca-Cola, also, of course, based right here where I live in Atlanta, to support a gentleman who was ascending into the CEO role, Muhtar Kent, who went on to lead the company for nearly 10 years as chairman and CEO. And it was an opportunity to help Muhtar frame his vision for where he wanted to take the company, and do so in a way that would inspire, engage, inform our employee base, but to your point, also inform our stakeholders about the future direction of the business. Prior to Muhtar taking the helm at Coke, the company had gone through several years of, I would say, some faulty succession planning. We had some hits and misses with some CEOs that had come in that really weren't that effective, weren't able to inspire the company and the culture, or had messed with the culture to a certain degree that morale was really down. And then we had an interim CEO in a gentleman by the name of Neville Isdale, who came out of retirement to kind of help repatch the company and repair the company and get at least get the morale back to where it was and get people excited to be at Coca-Cola again. Muhtar's job, he had a mandate from the board of directors to supercharge the business, to come in with a really strong vision, a really strong strategy, and to supercharge it. Neville got us to a place where we were, back on the tarmac. Muhtar's job was to just blast the business off. And he had a 25, 30-year track record of doing just that as an operator within the Coca-Cola system. He's a hard-charging Turk. He's a globalist. He grew up in 6, 7 different countries. His father was a foreign diplomat for the Republic of Turkey. Muhtar spoke 6 languages, but he also needed help. He spoke beautiful Queen's English, but he also needed help framing the message from a Western perspective. So I was brought in to help him do that. So really the first thing that we really focused on was, what is the story? Where do we want to take this business? What is that overarching meta narrative, if you will, for the Coca-Cola company? And so with that began this process of the ideation and creation of Muhtar's 2020 vision, which had a lot of different aspirational goals about doubling volume, doubling revenue, increasing margins, strengthening the beverage portfolio of products, repairing relationships with our independent bottling partners all around the world. So a lot of different, very tangible metrics, very operationally focused, at the same time, also very aspirational. So my job was to help take that narrative and use Muhtar, deploy Muhtar and his other senior executives in select forums around the United States, external forums around the United States, around the world, get them in front of key influencers, whether they were investors, whether they're in front of media, important business partners, B2B customers, industry influencers, even our detractors. Get them out there, get them in front of influential audiences, and have them basically act as thought leadership ambassadors for the company. So we deployed an entire, it's almost like political campaigning. We deployed an entire campaign approach to proactively get our executives out. At the same time, simultaneously, we had an internal campaign to humanize our executives and get them in front of our people and get them inspired in get our folks inspired through various channels. We used social media, we used the intranet, we used town halls, we walking the halls, simple things like showing up in the lunch hall, talking to employees, just various sort of videos, of course, just a whole gamut of different communication routines and channels to draw our executives in, and Muhtar draw them in closer to our employee base. So that was
but he was
a
not
concerted
seen...
effort that lasted several years. I'm sorry, Mikhail, go ahead.
No, sorry. He was not seen that much. That comes me to the question. If you look at Jeff Bezos, right, Amazon, if you look at Elon Musk, if you look at some other folks, Bill Gates and so on, the Coca-Cola reps, even James Quincy at this moment, nobody really knows he's a CEO. Nobody, meaning the white audience.
I would argue, Mikhail, that Muhtar in the beverage industry and the fast-moving, consumer goods space, he was very visible. He was at Davos every year. He was a media fixture. He was out there. He was pretty visible within the industry. But you're absolutely right. Was he a Jeff Bezos? Was he a Warren Buffett? Was he a Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates? Absolutely not. And to be honest with you, that was a very deliberate decision on our part. We had a job at the Coca-Cola Company to repair an internal culture and to repair an internal operating business model. And that was priority number one, is Muhtar need to be focused, and the senior leadership team really need to be focused heads down into the business. And then we would draw them out for select opportunities that we felt helped build the brand and made impact with stakeholders we wanted to reach. But our intention was never, and I'm not saying Microsoft's intention or Amazon's intention is to make their CEOs celebrities, but those,
that was my question.
In essence,
is it, or
they are celebrity CEOs, for better or for worse. And I think given the industry dynamics, the sexiness of technology, they're very mediagenic individuals, that naturally happens. But I think, especially in the environment we're in today, my counsel to anybody who's leading a company or counseling people who are leading companies is to be very, very, very selectful and choiceful about how you position CEOs in the marketplace. They need to be visible, absolutely, but overexposure can kill a CEO, both internally with their employees and maybe most importantly with the board. If the board starts feeling like these CEOs are more interested in going out and becoming Hollywood type figures than they are in running the business, and I've seen it happen, that can cause some serious problems. So you've got to be mindful of that.
That's one question, because that connects to the Czech Republic. Communism, 40 years, destroyed the feel that everybody can speak freely. Even 20 years, the revolution was 30 years ago. Still, it's in our genes a bit. We are the older generation. We're still fighting with it. We're still I would say reshaping our minds and our brains to think that we can speak freely. And you would find, and as a cause of this, you would find maybe one CEO who would be speaking, who would be a public figure that people would follow. We would not have almost anybody. They're still keeping, as I saw on Wall Street, keeping themselves on the 150th floor, had we have them, these skyscrapers. But it's changing, and nobody, and everybody's still, I dare to say, afraid to talk. Yeah. So that's why I'm asking, and I'm the path blazer for talking publicly about how important it is to have an icon like a leader.
Yeah, and that's I can totally understand how that dynamic would work out in the former Soviet bloc countries. I totally get that. That's very intuitive to me. I would also say, though, Mikhail, even in the West, we have a lot of CEOs who are reticent, who are reluctant to go out and to speak and to sort of raise their head above the parapet, if you will. They feel like they're big targets. They feel like in the world that we live in with 24/7 news cycle and all these social media channels that, there's just too much room for error. I think our job as communication counselors and CEO whispers, if you will, is, again, going back to let's be very, very choiceful about when you do go out and speak. I think it's imperative. And I think the mindsets in the Czech Republic and the former Soviet bloc countries will need to change. And hopefully they will evolve. And I think it's going to take people, quite frankly, like yourself and others who are leading the way, to set that example. But it can be done. And I don't necessarily think, in your counsel with your colleagues and other CEOs you deal with, they don't, I would reinforce, you don't have to be a Jeff Bezos. You don't have to be a Bill Gates or a Steve Ballmer. I mean, those are iconic figures. They're wonderful people. They're legends. But what you do have to be is you have to be an ambassador. You are, as the chairman and CEO or as the president of an operating unit, you are, in essence, the chief communication officer for your company, for your brand. And that comes with the responsibility of being thoughtful. You've got to get out there. You don't have to do it 17,000 times a month, but you got to look for, smart, strategic opportunities to go out and express your point of view to outside stakeholders into the media to help build your brand, to help build your thought leadership and to help people understand what your business is all about. We live in an era of where consumers and stakeholders yearn for transparency. They want to know what's going on, not only with the products and solutions you're offering as a business, but what's going on with the strategic thinking. How do executives think about the business and even the greater society and community as a whole? It's very important.
They're also asking them, what are you going to do about a couple of things like fall of Enron, right? That's when, I believe that's when the personal branding started to be important in terms of responsibility. We want to see the guys responsible for that. We want them to answer some critical questions.
No, that's absolutely right. And we continue to see companies to this day make some, strategic blunders, some reputational blunders, ethical blunders, and that's not going to go away. And I think it's a fraction of all businesses, but because business today is under such a microscope that's being driven by, again, very activist media culture here in the U.S. and in Europe, and just the nature of social media and it being always on. And you mentioned earlier, Mikkel, the quote from Buffett about a reputation being destroyed in 5 minutes. I would say in the social media instantaneous world we live in today, you can destroy a brand in 5 seconds.
In a second.
Absolutely. One tweet, one soundbite, at a small forum in Eastern Czech Republic to a local business group could be through social media, could be blown out onto the international stage. So everything that's local is now global, and everything that's global is now local, and that all has huge implications for your brand and your reputation.
All right. What I was trying to say is that people are now commenting things without really realizing it's affecting their personal brand. They put something on their social media and people read it, and they, like in the case of this guy, they automatically assume that since he's commenting it, he must know something about it. And I think with the C-suites execs from Coca-Cola, you had to talk to them about, guys, you really have to talk only about things that are associated with the brand.
No, that's absolutely right, and which also I must admit I had the luxury when I worked for Muhtar Kent. He was very astute about that issue. He looked at all of the various causes, social causes, environmental causes, economic causes that Coca-Cola was involved in from a sustainability standpoint. And he said, okay, we're going to take all this work and we're going to boil it down and focus it strictly on the work where we can make change. If it's tangential to our business, indirectly, maybe not so much. If it's tangential directly to our business and we can affect change like water management or women's empowerment issues and education issues, or issues around obesity and community development, things where we actually had an impact, that's where we would focus. If it was, pontificating about political moves or, social concerns in other countries that weren't adjacent to our business, we would refrain from that. So, and I think that's what we're seeing today, Mikkel, with a lot of executives, and even Silicon Valley is having these internal conversations as we speak. A lot of the leaders in the Valley have been very, how do we put it, very progressive, if you will, liberal in their points of view. They're speaking about issues that often don't have a lot of direct impact on their business. And I think there's being a reevaluation and pulling back from that and saying, okay, what matters to us? How can we impact change? And what's our point of view? Do we have credibility talking about this? And if we don't, we're not going to join that conversation. And the other thing you got to think about too, whether you're a small business or a large business, is for every issue, whether it's a wedge issue, political issue, whatever, you're going to have people on both sides of the aisle or in multiple sides of the aisle. In some European countries where you have this multilateral approach to politics, that's going to cause some internal division. So you got to be
Right.
careful about that as well, especially on political issues,
And that
about how that's going to be perceived inside your company.
and that also it connects to the communication that you have in the States that might not work in Japan, might not
That's
work
right.
in the Czech Republic, and so on. Tell me, UPS and Coca-Cola communication for a long time, has it ever happened you would wake up and you would see a message or some kind of PR online that you would be like, wow, we have to stop this. This is a disaster.
Yeah, that has certainly happened. It's there have been, and I'll just give you a case in point, and it
Mm-hmm.
gets back to what I was talking about earlier about the implications of dividing your employee
Yeah.
base. 4 years ago, November 4 years ago, uh, we woke up in November and Trump was the president of the United States. On
Mm-hmm.
the morning after the election, I was called into our chief communications officer's office, and he had a directive from the CEO, from Muhtar at the time. Um, get your people together and come up with a point of view. What do we need to do? What do we need to say to our employees? A lot of our employees are very concerned, especially our international employees working in Atlanta. We're very concerned about being
Mm-hmm.
deported and other issues, basically
Mm-hmm.
because of the political environment in which we were living. Um, and Muhtar and the company, they were getting ready to come out and send out an internal memo to our employee base, basically trying to calm them down. If you're concerned about this new administration,
Mm-hmm.
just know that we are committed to human rights, equal right. And I came in and said, time out. No. Listen, half of our employees, maybe even more than half, don't necessarily agree with that point of view.
All right.
They want secure borders. They want fair and free immigration policies, but they also want rigorous control at the border. So let's
Mm-hmm.
don't take a political issue and make a stand on it. So we try to walk them down, and we actually won. I mean, we actually convinced them to back away from that position, because the other thing is, and I mentioned, everything that's local is global, everything that's global is local. Well, everything that's internal is also external. So my thinking process was, if the chairman and CEO of the Coca-Cola company sends out an internal memo to his 346,000 employees around the world, guess
Mm-hmm.
what? That's also an external memo. That's going to go straight to the
Mm-hmm.
media. That's going to go straight to our customer base.
Right.
That's going to go straight to government and policymakers around the world,
Mm-hmm.
half of which are going to have issue with. So that happens, and I think we have a responsibility as counselors to CEOs to work through those tough issues with them, to help avoid blunders.
Well, so you survived through this, and then you onboarded James Quincy, and then you decided to leave Coca-Cola. You've founded Mass Communication, your own company with a couple of partners, right? You
That's right.
joined Virginia. Help me to understand what makes you leave such a company with such exposure and also responsibility, the level of responsibility, and so on. Walk me through the thought process and how it's been working for you.
Yeah, and I think Mikkel, I think this is my experience. I think is very germane to the work that you do and the people you deal with transfers and people making their next
Mm-hmm.
move. And part of that is just pausing, taking a look internally at what's going on with you, with the culture, with the business, doing a reality check, and trying to read, as we say here in the US, read the tea leaves, understand what is going on around you, and having that
Right.
self-awareness. And in my particular case, I had I'd been associated, with a CEO, a very strong-willed, strong-minded CEO of the Coca-Cola Company for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
A CEO who had his own, vision for the business, and was very collaborative and very open, but was seen as a very, very, very strong leader. And then I'm looking around. We've got a new leader, a young Brit by the name of James Quincy coming in,
Mm-hmm.
extremely qualified, extremely talented, beloved by our associate base, coming in And I could see, okay, you know what? He's going to want a completely new approach. He's going to want, he's going to want to complement Muhtar because it was a succession plan that was pretty seamless, but he's going to want a new approach. He's going to want new people in new roles. I saw where he was already starting to make changes across the communication function. And I said, you know what? It's been 10 years here. It's been 11 years. It's been a glorious 11 years. I've had a great run with one of the greatest CEOs in the beverage industry, in the history of the beverage industry. But, I'm in my late 50s. I'm a high earner. It's time to maybe make a move because I don't, quite frankly, I didn't think that I had a role at Coca-Cola once James was going to come in. And that's no knock to James. I would have done the same thing. New regime, come in with new ideas, new people, new start. So I totally got that. It was nothing personal. It was all professional. But, it was that ability to just sort of read the tea leaves and understand where business is going and taking the initiative for yourself. Don't wait around for others to control your destiny. Go out and be proactive. And it was interesting because you mentioned University of Virginia. The day that I had learned that we were, a new CEO was coming in, I also got a phone call from one of my faculty advisors at UVA, Dr. June West, asking me if I would be interested to come on as an executive in residence at UVA for 3 months every year. And I said, absolutely. And that was really the springboard to launch my own business, where I'm out now, not only teaching at UVA and teaching, the best and brightest young hotshot entrepreneurs like yourself, Mikkel, but also it gave me the platform to really supercharge my own business. So I'm working with a number of really interesting clients, Bank of Tokyo, McDonald's, Kimberly-Clark, Corteva Agriscience, the new spinoff company from Dow DuPont, Regions Bank, some really, really, really cool client, UPS. I'm still doing work actually for UPS. So I've built up this really interesting client base, and it's a lot of fun being on the outside, being an entrepreneur, controlling your own destiny, and then juggling 5 or 6 different major client brands at the same time, because you're building your brain around not only different companies, but different industry spaces. And that's been a real, for me, it's been a process of renewal and just stretching myself beyond where I ever thought I could be stretched. So it's been an extremely great move for me.
I'm super interested in how you're going to answer the questions coming at the end of this interview, but let's hold off on that. June, I like her very much. Obviously, I'm very close to Darden, and I would have to thank Sean Carr. Sean, if you're listening, thanks for putting me together with Steve. Very, very good cooperation with Steve as well. Steve, so the question is, and we're not getting close, but it's connected naturally through the course of our conversation. If you were giving a speech and there was somebody in the audience, a CEO or an owner of a company, and he or she would be looking at you and saying, well, I would like Steve to lead my company. I would like him to be the chairman of the board. I would like him to be the CEO. On the other hand, 20, 30 seconds, you've mentioned that you're enjoying being on your own solo and having all of the exposure to all of these execs you've mentioned. What would be the company, and do you have any on mind?
Oh man, there are so many that existing companies, but also I have this sort of ideal of what the ideal company for me would be that maybe it doesn't even exist right now. I'm very happy with what I'm doing, but I look around. I mean, this is going to sound maybe a little humorous coming to you, maybe not, but I would have the opportunity to run a company or run a brewery, an established brewery like Pilsner or Urquell, bring their management team back from Japan and ingrain them, maybe turn it into an employee stock ownership plan and turn the company back over to employees, bring it back, the management team back to the Czech Republic. We live in this hipster society where craft beers and great beer and great food matter more than ever. And,
right.
You guys in the Czech Republic are not only sitting on some of the most beautiful landscape in the world, but you're also, you've got this rich tradition of food and beverage and beer, and the Pilsner Urquell, I think, represents not only the craft of beer, but also it represents a lifestyle. It represents a motif that
Mm-hmm.
is deeply ingrained in Czech culture. And I've also, on a personal level, my family comes from Eastern Slovakia and the Carpathians originally. I mean, we've been in the
Mm-hmm.
United States for 150 years, but I've got that Slovak heritage in my blood. So that also draws me to your part of the world. But Pilsner Urquell would definitely be at the top of my list. But I wouldn't want to just be the CEO. I'd want to be an agent of change. I'd want to bring management back to the Czech Republic and excuse me, and turn the company back over to the employees and really have a democratic offering there. So
Yeah, you know that can happen. I mean, anything can happen. When I had Roman Sabalik, the CEO of Dell Technologies, here during our first episode, I asked him how did it happen that he would land a position of a CEO. He was actually in the same spot like you, having his own consulting business and having fun with that and so on. What happened is that out of nowhere, they came a call from London and asking him, an internal recruiter from Dell, asking him whether he was bored and whether he would be interested in the CEO role. When I asked Roman why he decided eventually to accept the role, he's like, well, I was getting lazy. And at my age, meaning, getting lazy is actually meaning to lose the IQ and lose the smarts.
right, right,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you will see eventually that can happen. I think we have a bigger dispute or bigger challenge with Budweiser, who's been fighting with the US, but for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. There could be a challenge to actually finally win this battle.
right, sure.
Yeah. By the way, we've talked about Jen Fraser. I just remembered. She was asked by Tiger Woods whether she would play, she would go on a golf course with him, and actually she first decided not to. Saying that she only does things at 120%, and she knows that she would not be able to compete with Tiger. The reason why I'm talking about this is actually who made her change her mind it was her son. And I always talk with Roman and with other folks about family. How much of your career has been impacted and influenced by family? Decisions from going play with Tiger to other critical decisions about locations and so on.
In my case, Mikhail, 100%. I mean, my wife and my children are truly business partners, not only family partners and life partners, but they're instrumental in the decisions that I've made in my own career, where we've lived, the kinds of companies I've worked for, the decisions when I've made to leave companies for various reasons. And I've been with some great companies. I mean, I started my career in Washington, D.C. in the journalism space, made a big move from Washington to Atlanta 26 years ago. And that was all, wouldn't have made that move without the counsel of my wife. And she's a stay-at-home mother, which is another, sort of strategic move, because she's given me the freedom to work, insane hours and in this insane pace and still have time for my family. And I could not have done that without that solid support of family. So I think family is extraordinarily important and will continue to be. We're seeing with, I think, millennial mindsets and expectations from this younger generation that they saw in a lot of their families from their parents, they saw some things that they just didn't want to they didn't want to participate in. They didn't want to have that kind of lifestyle of where, a lot of them were latchkey kids. They were at home. Both parents were working, and they want a different way. They want more balance in their life. They saw the sacrifices their parents made, and they're coming to the workplace with at least here in the U.S. I'd be interested to hear what you say about in the Czech Republic, but here in the U.S. they're coming with the expectation that work-life balance is going to be a major deciding point on whether they want to go work for you, as well as what your values are as a business, what your mission and purpose is, and your higher order values. So
that connects to the question I had about the CEO being an icon, or at least have somebody in the company who speaks about the company, who builds, creates, moderates, and basically makes the company culture appealing. to everybody. That's why to be on social media. So, social media mostly to show that the company is actually worth working for, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if that's the one thing, the way you can impart change in the Czech Republic about getting mindsets about senior leadership to go out and speak thoughtfully, even if it's not part of their culture, there's still some of that fear that's left over from from the Soviet regime. It's that. It's like, look, if you want to recruit the best and brightest to your company, you're going to have to be out there. You're going to have to be talking about issues that are important to them and important to your business. So if for no other reason than a pure recruiting reason, which is
exactly
probably arguably the most important reason of all, it makes a lot of sense.
Let's look at talking about what what messages would be appealing to the potential hires or generations. It connects me to one of the last questions of this podcast, and that is, if you had to leave 2 notes written somewhere for the future generation, something that's resonating within your head with kind of maturity that you have, experience that you've gained, what would you write on a small sheet of paper?
Sure. The first thing I would write would be understand the business that you're working for from the ground floor up. A lot of MBAs, a lot of other college educated students that have graduated, are coming into the workforce, are coming in and low level or mid level management positions, and all they're thinking about is that next move, moving up and up the ladder to everybody wants to be CEO or at least a C-suite executive, right?
Right.
That can't happen. That really can't happen unless you start first looking down,
right,
understanding what's going on at the shop floor level, understanding what's going on at all levels of the business, understanding the business model, understanding the consumer mindset, understanding why the company is structured the way it's structured, understanding why routes to market and supply chain and operating models and strategy, understanding that at a very intimate level and really, really, really incorporating that knowledge into the way that you think and react and you plan at the level of the business you're in. So, everything has got to be, I think, having that holistic look of the business. And UPS, it was, you got to understand the daily reality of that package delivery driver, that person, lady or gentleman who's out there delivering packages every day. You have to understand what they're going through, the pressures that are on them, the methods that we're trying to install in them, the values. And if you don't understand that, there's no way that you can understand anything else about the business. So I think it's lesson 1 is just learn the business and start from the bottom. Even if you're not located at the bottom of the company, understand how that works. And that will help you accelerate further to the top, in my point of view. The second thing is, and we spoke to it earlier about work-life balance, is that never underestimate the power of personal renewal. Take time for vacation. Take time to unplug from social media. Take time away from the office. Spend time with family. Travel. Hike, camp. Get out there. I mean, I think the only thing that's really kept me alive. I'm in my late 50s now, and I've been in some pressure cooker environments for the last 30 years. Pretty much tethered to CEOs at high-profile companies, and I still am, even as an independent contractor. But you got to walk away from that, and you got to be able to recharge and retool. So I think that notion of personal renewal is incredibly important. And I have conversations with some of my students at Darden, and a lot of them are talking about, well, for the next 3 years, it's just going to be 20-hour days, and I'm just going to, I'm just going to hunker down and sacrifice. And I love that commitment, but at the same time, you can't burn yourself out. And I think, during the pandemic, the last 6 months, people are starting to really kind of come to terms with that. They understand what burnout, what depression, what sort of some of the mental chavlenges that, or mental health challenges that people are facing. It's all coming to fruition. So I think that notion of just being committed to renewal and having the courage to pull away from the business when you need to for yourself and your family and your friends is critically important.
And you mentioned, actually, I have two more questions. You mentioned COVID and everything associated with coronavirus and so on. I was at my during my previous podcast, I was talking about the CEO right now feeling kind of he's on a sailboat on the open ocean, being covered with fog, not really seeing where his sales guys are, salesman, and where's everybody kind of relying on the maturity and the level of professionality of these guys. Before it was very easy. You would meet somebody in the hallway of the office and so on. How? And it's a good question for you coming from communication. How do you keep guys engaged? How do you keep employees engaged where they no longer meet in the office? How do you keep them motivated where you cannot really be there with your energy, which is very important, obviously, with your with your hunger for success and for their success? How do you go about it? What would be the advice for the senior leaders right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would argue that communication right now, authentic communication, walking the halls, if you will, peeking in people's offices, asking how they're doing, even though you can't do that physically right now, you can do it virtually. And we've got these wonderful tools like you're bringing to us today with Zoom to do that. And you pick up the phone. And I think, it's in some ways when you're in a physical building, what we've learned is that it's too easy to take people for granted because you kind of see them from the distance and you can nod and, hey, how you doing? But we can't do that now, right? So it's going to take more than a nod and a raising of eyebrows and a smile on your face. You've got to actually take the time to pick up the phone, to jump on a Zoom, to jump on a Google Teams call, whatever, and make sure that communication is a priority. And I think a lot of CEOs have learned that over the last 6 months that this is the number one challenge as well as opportunity that they're facing as an organization is how do we go about creating a culture that is engaged in this environment, because we're going to have to change. There's going to be a lot of learnings that's coming out of the last 6 months. It's been we're in this compressed incubator, if you will, where innovation is not taking months and years to incubate. It's taking weeks, right? Which is a good thing, but it's also going to force us to change our business models, our operating structure, our organizational structure. And none of that can be achieved unless you're communicating with people. So it's just establishing smart communication routines and follow up. It's communicate,
repeat,
over communicate. That's the counsel I would give.
Repeat, and I'm leading the Monster career in the Czech Republic. Monster worldwide is obviously still the number one job board in the whole world, and it became for me very hard to keep on the level of motivation that I had when I was in the office. Because people saw me, because we could talk, and as you said, we could have the elevator talk. We could talk by the waiting for the printer to start working, and so on. So that was a huge challenge. And what actually happened in my case, the number of calls and number of Teams meetings dramatically increased because I had to start being in touch with people that I was not before.
Yeah, and Mikkel, that's where it gets back to that point. You asked me about 2 notes I would leave students, pearls of wisdom. And I also think it gets back to renewal. I think the people that take the time to disengage, it sounds sort of counterintuitive, but if you take the time, the selectful time to disengage and walk away and create that personal time for yourself, whether it's hiking or, going to a brew pub or just walking the streets of Prague or whatever, if you get into that discipline of helping yourself relax and getting into that mind space, I think that's a great way to recharge your batteries. And you got to be selectful. I mean, you've got a very stressful job you're probably working 16-hour days. You've got a family that you love, but you got to find that time for yourself. And I think that will help get you into the headspace to show the energy and to show the passion and show the commitment to your people. It's not going to happen though unless you take time for renewal, because you're going to get burnt out. People are getting burnt out, and that's not a good thing.
Yes, I agree. So the last questions the last question comes to a question of you possibly coming to Prague, and then hosting maybe a session for the C-suite guys from the major companies talking about building brands, building communications plans, and basically what we've talked about. Which once I reach out to you, once everything what's going on right now is gone, would you be willing to come?
Oh, I'd be there yesterday. I love your country. I think Prague's one of the greatest cities in the world. I love your culture. I think there's great opportunity with your businesses. I had the opportunity earlier in my career. I guess it was back in 2004 when I was with UPS. I led an initiative within our company to establish a conference where we brought in thought leaders from business, government, civil society to talk about various issues around global trade and supply chain management and development. And I went to Prague and had the honor of meeting with President Havel, who was such an extraordinary man, and he honored us by speaking at our conference.
Very good.
That was one of the great moments in my career.
That's fantastic.
There's so much entrepreneurial vitality in your country and in your cities that and very well respected. You have one of the most educated workforces in the world. The work ethic in Eastern and Central Europe and Czech Republic in particular is widely heralded around the world. That's why companies have call centers there and tech centers there and R&D centers there. There's a reason for that. And I think to be part of that would be an amazing honor. And I'd jump at the opportunity. Absolutely.
That can actually, with a Darden alum, George, who lives in Prague, we've been talking about this as well. So this doesn't come as a question of now. It's something that I had on mind for a longer time, but given what's going on right now and the limitations of travel, it's something that we can discuss a little bit later.
Great. Well, Mikkel, count me in.
Steve, well, great to have you on the Headhunted podcast. Thank you so much for accepting the invite and for talking to us about not only yourself, but also, about the communication, branding, giving me your insights on the new moves and what's happening in the industry and so on. So thank you so much for having us and having me.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Guys, so that would wrap up today's session of the Headhunted podcast. I thought that you would enjoy talking to Steve Soltis, and I'm looking forward to the next, which is going to be very exciting, I promise. For everybody on the Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, I wish you a great day. Bye.